Automatic web page translation with Zapier. Set it up once, translate any article or web page instantly, even with complex formatting and glossary rules. If you've got a website with hundreds of articles and you need translations really quickly and easily, sometimes the automated translation options out there are not that great. So in this automation, we're going to look at how you can set up your own batch translator using Zapier and Airtable and Zapier Agents. And that's going to give you a lot more options when it comes to producing translations as a big batch quickly and easily for a low cost. I just want to talk quickly about the three tools that we're going to be using in this tutorial and the reasons why I've chosen those tools for this task. So the first one we're going to look at is Airtable. I'm not going to cover the absolute basics, but the reason it's good for this workflow is because the automations in Airtable work really well with Zapier. It made the most sense in terms of working with a file that contains lots and lots of articles that needs to be imported and exported quickly from one app to another. Zapier, again, I've done tutorials about the basics of Zapier before. Zapier makes it really easy to put together a workflow of an automation, and it plays well with Airtable. So then the third tool we're looking at is Zapier Agents, which is sort of a sub-brand of Zapier. And Agents is a fairly new tool within the Zapier family, and it kind of allows you to use a lot of LLM AI functionality within your Zaps without having to go into OpenAI or Claude and find API keys and all the rest. What I've found compared to some other LLM automations is that Agents makes it fairly easy to produce reliable outcomes without too much work. And since we're translating something here again and again and again using the same formula, that's really important for this one. Here we are in Airtable, and the first thing I'm going to do is create a new app base. I just need to name this something meaningful. Okay, so table 1, let me call this, and there's a bunch of fields. I'm going to remove these fields and create some new fields of my own. And here we go. So I've set up those fields now, and just to walk through each one individually. So title will be the title of the original source article. Content will be the content, the HTML code or the HTML content that is contained within the source article, the untranslated article. Article ID, and this is just a unique identifier that you can use for each article to make sure that there's always a way to identify it. Language, this is a multi-select, so at the moment you've got the option of French and Spanish, and that's just based on the source language that is that the original title is created in, and obviously this can be whatever language you're using. Translation status, again, this is another select, and this is currently using pending and complete. Again, you can use whatever options that you need to put in there, and then these two fields are translated title, translated content, and this is where we will push the translations when they're ready. So what that's going to look like is that you enter a new row here with an article that you want to translate, and then depending on the size of the article, probably after a minute or two, you will actually just see the translated article appear on the same row. And you can add in rows in batches, so you will be able to paste in multiple rows from another table onto this table, and they will just be queued up in Zapier, and all those translations will be carried out and will just appear on this in this table. So really good way of translating a whole bunch of articles and returning consistent results each time. Here we are in Zapier now, and I should say before we continue with Zapier, the functionality that we're looking at here, which is a multi-step Zap, which calls an agent, if you're going to carry that out on a batch of articles, you will need a paid account for that. So I believe that's in and around, well, as you can see, so what I've done here is I've signed up for this 14-day trial, which you can do as well. So you can take 14 days and experiment with the features and make sure it's working before you sign up. And I'm not going to cover the basic steps of Zapier here because, again, we have another tutorial on the channel which you can check out, which looks at how to set up basic connections between Zapier and Airtable. So go check that out if you haven't done it already. But in here in Zapier, I'm going to create a new Zap, and I want to call it something useful. And so yeah, we're going to start with this trigger, and I want an Airtable trigger. I'm going to use the new record trigger. And in here, so as I said, the connection should be set. The connection here is set up for me already. As long as your connection is set up properly, you should be able to see all of the bases and tables within your within your Airtable account, depending on what you've selected permissions wise. And if you're not seeing the base that you're looking for, it might be worth going into that connection and just checking that the permissions are set up. But I've selected my translation base and my Zapier table. Everything else is fine there. And then I'm just going to test this out. I'm going to add a sample record in here. That should be everything we need just to test this out. So let's test the trigger. And what it's done is hang on, I think I just need to find new records. Yeah, so it's pulling records that it's found within that Airtable. So if I look at that D, not sure what these are, but this D record has everything we have just entered into Airtable. So that should show the most recent row which was added to the table. And you can use this to test as we go on. So here we are in Zapier Agents, and what I'm going to do first of all is create a new agent. And yeah, lots of templates here, but I'm just going to create a custom agent. Skip that. You can do things like describe your agent, and I might set it up for you automatically, but we're just going to go in and create our prompt ourselves. And what you'll see is you've got the kind of some familiar elements from other apps. So you've got a trigger here. You've got the ability to add tools, and that's a bit like adding steps in Zapier. You've got access to the same amount of tools. And then this is your prompt area. So this is where you're going to actually enter a prompt which tells the agent what its task is. And so the first thing we're going to do is add a trigger, and we want to choose trigger by Zap, and what that means is that this agent is expecting to be triggered by a Zap. And what we're going to do now is via this add tools menu, we're going to add, this is where we will add the glossary of terms to the agent here. And so the way the glossary is going to work is it is a selection of terms in different languages, basically a selection of rules. So the agent always knows the terms across the different languages that you want it to use. And what that means is that every time it performs a translation, you know that those translations are going to be accurate and consistent, which is a really, really important thing when you are creating translations across an entire website. So I have created this glossary like this. So as you can see, it's just a list of English term, French term, Spanish term, and this you can easily create this yourself. So this would just be all of the terms that you use across your website and the approved terms for those. And what I've done is exported that. That's a Google Sheet, but I've exported that as a CSV file. And what I'm going to do is via this Add Tools menu, if you click in here, you should be able to find this Upload File panel, and then it's hopefully going to give me the chance to upload a file. Here we are. That's a website glossary. It's a CSV, and it's uploaded. And I'm just hitting Add Data Source. And what it's done is it's imported that into the prompt, so it's ready to go there. And what we want to do is insert that into the right place in the conversation so that it knows exactly when and where to use that glossary. What I've done here is pre-prepared a prompt, which I'm just going to paste into this now, and I'll explain that step by step. Okay, so I just pasted that in. So I'm just setting this up the way it should be, so I want to make sure that it is really easy to read by the agent. Right, so let's explain this line by line. So just explaining the overall mission for the agent. You're a batch translation processor for a website of software articles. So you want to be really short and succinct there and tell it exactly what it should be doing and what it's there for. And I'm setting up this processing mode. So this is just a series of directives to make sure it knows exactly how to process what I give it. So I want to process input immediately without conversation. Now this is really important because the default state of the agent is to work in this conversational interface where it's expecting you to go back and forth and give it instructions one at a time. But of course what we want to do, because we are calling this from a Zap, we want the agent to carry out a set of instructions independently without stopping for conversation. So we want it to carry out the task by itself without having to ask for instructions, and then return the information we want independently. So this line should help with that. Now, return only the translated title and HTML content. this is telling the agent what it needs to return from the workflow. So from this, we only need the translated title and translated content. We don't need anything else, any of the other values that we've been working with in the Zap. And there is one other place where we have to specify these values in the Zap. I'm going to come on to that in a few minutes. Next one, again, do not ask questions or wait for confirmation. So just making sure that it knows to work independently and not to expect any input from myself when I'm carrying out the workflow, and don't provide explanations unless there are critical errors. So you don't want the agent to get kind of hung up on providing lots of explanations about what it's doing, except when there's critical errors. So just it is useful to keep that as a debugging step if there is a big problem, and you can dig into that. But otherwise, we don't want it to describe every single thing it's doing as it goes. And then on to input format. So just telling it what to expect in terms of input, and we're specifying source language, target language, title, and HTML content. So those are just some of the fields that we already have in the Airtable table. And translation rules, we want it to apply glossary terms from. Now this is where we refer to the CSV that we've provided here. So I'm just going to make sure that's in the right place in the prompt. So it's saying apply glossary terms from, and then it's looking at this uploaded CSV file for those glossary terms. So it knows to apply those rules. And then I've just added another one, which is use sentence case for translated titles, just because that's a personal preference. So this is a good place to put in any other rules that you might have around translation. So if there is a certain style, you might have a style guide that you want to include here. That could be useful. You could also include rules around the types of punctuation to use, or maybe the types of HTML you want it to use. In the past, I've done things like strip out style tags using these translation rules, or just remove unnecessary formatting possibly. So you can do a lot of different things within this translation, more than just translating, which is really useful. And then finally, output format. Again, just underlining, we want to return the translated title and HTML immediately. No confirmation, no explanation. We don't want it to get hung up looking for something from us. We just want it to return that translated content as it is. Okay, so this is it's really quite short and to the point, and it should give you everything you need for the agent to return what we want without any unnecessary conversational stuff going on. And once we've got everything in there, we can hit test agent. So it's having a think, and it didn't receive the necessary translation content. That's fine. We will provide that via the Zap, but we know that it's got everything it needs to get started. So the next thing we'll look at is how to actually trigger this within the Zap itself. Okay, back in Zapier, and now what we want here is we want an agents app, and the action we want to use is, well, there is only one option, it's run agent. And so we specify that and we choose the agent we want. It should pull out automatically the list of agents that you've created in your account already. This is one of the great things about using Zapier and Zapier Agents together, is it's really tightly integrated. You don't have to go through any special steps to tell them how to see each other. So I can just specify that there. Now this input message, what's the difference between this input message and the prompt in the agent itself? Well, this is basically this is like the interface between the Zap here and the agent, and it's providing a little bit of extra context to pass the raw information through that the agent is going to be picking up at the other end. So I'm going to pass 4 values in through this input message. So it's going to be source language, target language, article title, and article content. And target language, we always want that to be English, so that's just a static value. The source language, we want this to be coming from, we want this to be a dynamic value. So we're going to use, we're going to map a value from the trigger here. So we just hit / there, and this gives us the options for all of the values that have been pulled through the trigger step from Airtable. Source language is in the language field. Target language is always the same. Article title is coming from title. Article content is content. So simple as that. And so you'll always be passing through dynamic values into the agent, making sure that it's receiving the raw data that we pass through to the agent language, and then the title and the content that it should be translating from that language into English. This setting here is about whether we want the Zap run to pause while the agent thinks. And because the translation is going to take several minutes, we definitely do want to pause the Zap, so I'm going to keep that as yes. And then this output field section is where you actually tell the agent what to return from the process. So we're going to have two returned values. If we go back to the agent, we can see the output format is returning a translated title and HTML. So we just want to specify those two values here, and then Zapier knows what values are going to be returned by the agent. So we can call these whatever we want, but I'm going to call it translated title and translated content. And in these fields, we can map fields here, but because we're dealing with the agent using natural language, we need to tell it what it's actually pulling out from the agent process. So I'm just going to paste this, almost like a mini prompt in itself. But what we're expecting is translated HTML content with all the structure and formatting intact. And that prompt is going to be used to pull out the value from the agent, which is then going to be mapped to this field, and we can use it in subsequent steps. Similarly, I've got another mini prompt for the content. Oh, I've got them the wrong way around. Excellent. There we go. So the testing of these agent steps is different from your usual Zapier step because it doesn't go into the agent to carry out the workflow. It simply tests whether there's anything obvious in the setup that isn't working. So we can continue here, we can run a test, and it will probably be successful. Let's have a look. Yeah, it was sent to an agent in 4 seconds. Now the agent's not actually done anything there. It's just testing that call is successful, but that's enough for us to proceed to the next step. In Zapier again, and we are looking at the next step after the run agent. So we want to just add this step in here, and it is an Airtable, and the one we're looking at is update record. So the plan is to pull the information that's been returned from the agent and to push that via this step, the update record step, push that back into the Airtable in the same row as the row where we submitted. Okay, so we want to, this is all set up here. On the configure step, then we want to find the correct base. So we choose the translation base. We've got a little warning here about a possible Zap loop. Don't worry about that too much now. It's just it's something that could happen because you're using the same record to input the data and then to push it back to that record. But actually, I wouldn't worry about that. That'll be fine. Now we've got our base set up. We don't want to choose the right table, so let's choose the Zapier table. And this record needs to match the record ID. So we actually want to refer to the record ID that we pulled in the new record step here. So for this record field, we want to make sure that we're using a custom field, and then we are going to look within the new record in Airtable step, and then it's this ID is the one we want. So let's bring that in here. Now the three values that we want to pull back into Airtable are the translated content, the translated title, and then the status. We want to change that status automatically to complete, just to show that the translation process is complete. So I wouldn't worry about these fields here. We don't want to touch those right now. The translation status, like I say, we want that to be complete. And then translated title, we want this to map to the within run agent step. We want to pull in the translated title output, and then similarly in translated content we want to pull in this translated content, and that's all that we need to pull back into Airtable. So I'm going to continue with that, going to give it a test, and we can see that was a success. Excellent, we're in great shape, and all we need to do now is to actually test the entire flow. So what I've got here is so this is a list of articles that is maybe similar to a list of non-English articles that you have exported already from your website. So I'm just going to copy and paste these into Airtable to set up these records that we can use as the test. So I'm just going to check out the fields that we actually need to import. So we need title, content, article ID, and language. Those are the minimum fields that the Zap will be expecting in order to carry out the translation. So I'm just going to make sure I've got all 4 of those in the right order, and I think content is not quite in the right place, so let's pull that over. This is Google Sheets. You can copy and paste from Google Sheets straight into Airtable. So pasting in there just takes a little second to populate, and then you can see that has entered in nicely. And if we go into Zapier now and just refresh the records, you see record F created just now, and I click on that and I can see that it is the article that I've just pasted into Airtable, so that's perfect. Now, to actually run the test then, so we just hit the test run button, and you can see it as it runs through. So that's now completed, and you can, if we go back to Airtable, you can see that the translated title and translated content have been entered in. Let's check out the quality of that translation. And I've just pulled up the glossary now to check out to make sure the terms that they've used in the translation are correct. And so you can see dashboard and tableau de bord are the 2 terms that are matched there, and looking at the translation, that has been matched really well, so that's great. I'm not going to dig into the specifics of the translation quality, but you can do that in your own time. In my experience, I've found that to be really effective with the prompt that we've used there. So you should find pretty much most of the time that those glossary rules are applied, and it should be a good quality translation. Comparing the quality of these LLM translations with something older like Google Translate or DeepL, you should find the quality of the translations is much better than those older engines. So I'm just going to try and hit the publish button from here, which is the other way of turning the Zap on. And there we go, it's on. Now what we should find is that this works automatically. So I'm going to go back to Airtable again. Let's pull a record, another sample record in. So let's try the second one. Just copying that over into Airtable. And it's pasted in there. Now this should just, after a minute or so, it should just appear. So let's see if that's appeared. And here we are, the translation has appeared now. That took a few minutes, and if you're ever wondering if the translation is actually happening behind the scenes, you can go into the, if you're in Zapier Agents, you have this All Activity tab here, and you can, from here, you can see something in action. So why don't we paste in another translation and see it in action here. So just choose another one here at random, and I'm going to paste it in. So it might not be an immediate thing, but if we go into the Zapier Agents now and just refresh, and now the update has appeared there. So you can see it's output the translated title and the HTML content here. If we go back into Airtable, you can see that it's now been popped back into the right row. So there we go. We've got a little application here that is super quick to put together, really easy to use. Just to talk about usage really quickly. So every one of these zaps that has been called will equate to 1 planned task. So if you're running 100 translations in Airtable, 100 rows, you should probably see 100 tasks being used here. And the usage is a little bit different in the agents. All you need to know is that the usage is slightly different in agents and zaps. So if you're translating a lot of content, just keep an eye on the allocation that you have there for the number of activities and the number of zaps, and those should increase until you might hit your plan limit. So it's just something to be aware of. Obviously you can pay more if you want to raise that limit as well. So there we go, a super simple application that will allow you to enter untranslated content into these rows in Airtable, and then will output the translated versions, which you can then use to export back into whatever tool you're using, maybe the website or whatever. So what content are you going to translate? Blog posts, product pages, knowledge-based articles, Drop your use case in the comments, maybe I'll build that automation next. Hit like if it beats manual translation work, and subscribe for more Zapier automation tutorials. See ya.